Hi there, I'm Monica. Welcome back to Darling Lemons. This is a tutorial on how to knit a bookmark. A lot of my friends read daily, so bookmarks make a nice gift. Let's get started. For this project, you'll need a pair of scissors, as well as a sewing needle specifically for yarn. They're thicker than a normal sewing needle. I'll link an example down in the description if you're not sure. Make sure that you also have a crochet hook. The one that I have on hand is a 1.9 millimeter, but as long as it can hook all of the strands of your yarn, it'll work just fine. You'll of course need your knitting needles as well. Here I have US size 8 or 5 millimeter bamboo needles, and I've chosen to use this yarn left over from another project. I like the added specks of color in this one, so we're going to go ahead and use that. You'll begin by casting on 10 stitches. If casting on is new to you, watch my video on how to cast on. It's linked here and in the description below. Row number 1 will be a knit row, meaning that all of the stitches will be knit for this row. Make sure to keep your yarn in the back for each stitch, as you can see here. If you want a step-by-step tutorial on how to do a knit stitch, here's my video on that and down below as well. Really, this is a super simple pattern. It goes by really quickly, especially if you're relaxing, watching TV. Once you get it down, you'll be done before you know it. Row number 2 will be a purl row. You guessed it. All of the stitches will be purled for this row. That means keeping the yarn in the front for each stitch as shown here. I also have a step-by-step on how to purl, and I will link it here as I did with the others. So now continue to repeat rows 1 and 2 in that order until you have a total of 36 rows. I've sped up this section because it's really repetitive. Some of you may already know that when you alternate one knit row with one purl row and continue in that pattern as I'm doing here, we call that working in stockinette. Sometimes in a pattern, you will see some sections ask you to work in stockinette, and now you know what that means. Alright, so here I have a total of 6 rows. You can see what that is starting to look like. I'm going to continue working in stockinette until I've completed those 36 rows. However, the more you progress with this pattern, you'll notice something will start to happen with your work. I'll go ahead and work on it some more and then show you what I mean. So here I'm back and I've made some progress. As you can see, the work is starting to curl up in the back. Now, the piece is actually much bigger if we extend it like this, but what we want is for it to curl up as it's doing naturally. That's what gives it this rounded shape. So go ahead and continue until all of your rows are done. Alright, so here is the bookmark so far. As you can see, it's almost done. It has curled up quite nicely here in the back, just like we wanted. This is concealing the wrong side, the purl side, which in the end will be completely invisible. We only want to see the right side with all of the knit stitches once we're done. If at any point you lost track of how many rows you worked, start at the bottom and count each arrow from bottom to top. Each arrow counts as a row, and they should be pretty easy to see. For example, here we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and so on. To move on, the next step is to bind off all of the stitches on your needle. This will finalize the knitting aspect of this project. To bind off, we're going to bind off in purl, because the next row would have been a purl row. To do this, the yarn will be placed in the front, and instead of only purling one stitch, this time you are going to purl 2 stitches together. So insert the needle through the first stitch and the second stitch as well. That's the first one, and here's the second one. Now you can purl them by wrapping the yarn and pulling it through both of the stitches at the same time. Slip it off as usual. Now you will purl the next stitch normally. As you can see, you should have 2 stitches on your right needle. Now to bind off, you have to pick up the stitch on the farthest right with your left needle and pull it over the stitch that you just purled and over the needle as well. Just like this. So you end up with 1 stitch on your right needle. Now to repeat, you purl the next stitch normally, so you again have 2 stitches on your right needle. Pick up the farthest right stitch with your left needle and pull it all the way over the stitch that you just purled and off the needle as well. Repeat this pattern again and again until you're left with only 1 stitch. As you bind off, keep in mind that you should never have more than 2 stitches on your right needle at any given time. Once you get the hang of it, you'll be able to bind off a lot faster. If this is your first time binding off, really take your time. Make sure all of your stitches are properly finished off. Once you've reached the end, you should be left with a single stitch. I'm going to speed up the last bit of this since it's the same thing repeated until you reach the end. Okay, 1 last stitch to go and we're almost done. Eventually, this is what your end will look like. You can see how the piece has curled up quite nicely. Now I'll be taking this last stitch and I'll open it up to give myself a lot of room for this next step. Open it enough to pull the entire yarn ball through. Once you've pulled it out the other end, make sure it's nice and taut, pulling it all the way just like this. Wonderful. Now you're going to measure twice the length of the bookmark using the yarn that's still attached to the end. Once and twice. Cut the yarn at the point that you measured to using your scissors. Now take your sewing needle and attach it to that end, the one that you just cut, making sure all the strands go through. Now take the end of your bookmark that's attached to the needle and flip it inside out, like I'm doing here, until you see the wrong side only, meaning the purl side. And this is how we are going to sew up the entire length of the bookmark. Start at this end by putting the needle through both ends of the stitches on the top there. Make sure you get them together and pull the needle all the way through. Do this again, moving on to the next 2 stitches and pulling it again all the way through. Make sure that as you pull the yarn, it lays on top of the stitches you just sewed together. Don't focus too much on perfection here, just make sure all of those stitches are being sewn evenly. I'll speed this up a bit as I do a few more stitches, and once they're all done, you can meet me back here for the next step. At this point, we're almost done, but there are still a few things left to do. Alright, so here we finished sewing it up. Go ahead and tie up those 2 ends, make sure it's nice and taut so nothing can become undone. This next part is pretty fun. You're going to turn your work inside out. This will take some time. Just pull it all the way through until it's right side out. Reach inside and pull on it bit by bit. Eventually, it'll come out the way you want it to. Once the piece is right side out, this is what it will look like. Now what sometimes happens is you get a little thread sticking out if it got caught on your nail or something. It has an easy fix. With your crochet hook, pull it inside where it will no longer be visible. And there you go. Your bookmark is all sewn up. You could weave in the ends and stop here if you wanted to, but I like to add tassels to mine, so that's what I'm going to show you how to do next. Measure out about this much yarn. It really depends on how long you want your tassel to be. This gives me an idea of how long my tassel will be. Measure out that same length again and again, cutting it each time until you have enough thread to give your tassel the volume that you want. I like my tassels to be nice and full. I didn't count exactly how many I cut here, but I just stopped when it looked to be enough. If later on you realize you want to add more, you can always come back and cut some more until you reach the desired result. So this to me looks like it's enough. I'm pretty happy with that volume. Put those aside for now and take your crochet hook in hand. Take one of the strands, and you're going to want to fold it down the middle, just like this. Go ahead and put your crochet hook through both ends, making sure you go in through both of them. So now you can hook your thread and pull it through, but not all the way, just enough to open it up and pull through the two ends, just like I'm doing here. Make sure that once you've pulled them through, it's nice and taut. You can see it brings those two ends together, closing it up, and you have your first tassel secured in place. Repeat the same process with the remaining pieces of thread that you cut. Again, I'll be speeding up this section for you. Don't put all the tassels in the same place. Space them out along the bottom as much as you can. Some of them will for sure end up in the same space, depending on how many you have, but just do your best. Clearly it still needs a final touch, so this is where you take them all in your hand and tie them up like I'm doing here, wrapping it around and pulling all of those ends through the loop you've just made. Make sure every single one goes through before pulling too much. For this to look nice, you have to make sure that the knot ends up covering the section where all of the strands of yarn are attached. Otherwise, it's not going to look very nice. So as you can see, pull down on it slowly and take your time adjusting it little by little until you see the knot is in the right place. So here I have some room to adjust. The knot is a little too high here, so I'll be pulling it down even more. You don't want it too high or else it'll be too bulky and it'll cover up a nice part of your bookmark. Pull it down as far as you can without exposing the area where all of your strands are attached. Once you've got it right where you want it, you can pull each strand individually to make sure it's as tight as it can be. This will ensure your knot actually ends up looking cute and neat. Now, clearly here at the bottom, we need to do some trimming. So take your scissors and cut it as straight as you can. I just look at the shortest strand and try to even it out there. Once you've done this, your bookmark is finished, tassel and all. Go ahead and admire it, try it out. Just know that you can get creative by customizing the colors. Maybe you knit in one color and you decided to use a different color for your tassels. It's really up to you. That's about it for this tutorial. Don't hesitate to share in the comments if you liked it. I really think they make a nice gift, and I would love to have your feedback if you try it out. If you have any ideas for future tutorials, let me know in the comments and I'll be happy to take a look. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you want to stay updated on other projects, make sure to check out my Instagram, Darling Lemons Crafts, and I hope to see you again soon.